All right, I think we're going to have a few people still trickle in, but we can get started. Welcome everybody to the Small Farm and Beginning Farmers series that Muscatine County Extension is putting on. We're happy to have you. Today we are going to talk about selling at the farmers market, specifically about cottage foods and produce, selling produce at the farmers market. And then we'll also touch a little bit on the farmers market nutrition program that you can participate in if you sell at the farmers market. So I will let Shannon introduce herself and we can get started.
All right, good evening. I am Dr. Shannon Coleman. I am an associate professor and state extension specialist in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. And my extension appointment is through Human Science Extension. And for the past 8 years, I've been tackling the topic of cottage food here in Iowa. And so, you'll hear about my dream coming true in 2022. All right, so here's an outline for tonight's presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about me and the work that I do and the programming and resources that I provide. We'll talk through the new Iowa regulations for cottage food and home food processors. And then we'll get some updates as far as Iowa regulation and as well as other curriculum that I have that'll be ideal for this target audience. And so, as you see with the topic for this presentation tonight, that there is a growing interest in farmers markets, and we've seen a surge in their interest over the past few years. As a result, we have seen an increase in the local foods movement, as well as those who want to establish their own cottage food business. As far as local food, locally grown and produced foods, they have become more prevalent. However, when we talk about how these entities are governed, they're not so much uniform throughout the United States. So when I think about the different counties that are on the line border of Iowa, I get a lot of calls of what can I do if I cross the border. So the whole conversation of Omaha and Council Bluffs. So the one thing I do tell people a lot is you will have to follow their regulations if you plan to sell over there. And so when I started here, my job description talks about me contributing to value-added and local foods here in Iowa. And so that's one of the target audiences that I work with in my programs. And so through my extension work, one of my first goals is to provide food safety education, resource, and other outreach programs appropriate and practices related to the production of quality and safe food products through the local food systems. And so I do that through the production and development of fact sheets or infographics, videos, and curriculum. And so we will talk about an example of each with the rest of this talk focusing on curriculum. And so with fact sheets, we use that as a short form of communication to communicate research-based information. So although this looks like a lovely picture of the farmers markets, we have things to consider when you're at the market, such as not having your produce on the ground, covering your products, as well as your samples, making sure that there's a restroom at the farmers markets, as well as that hand washing is a priority. When this fact sheet was originally developed, Kristen Taylor, our creative specialist, had put butterflies up there. And the colleague that was working with me on this infographic said, no, we need birds, because birds do transmit a lot of bacteria, and depending on where that bird hangs out a lot, they may even carry foodborne pathogens. Videos have been a part of my life as well, and as a part of my role. We use them as visual communication of how-to for research-based information. And I've been doing that through the area of produce safety. I'm a part of our Safe Produce team, and I had to have my own unique project. And so I decided to focus on video development. And so we have 10 English videos that are out there on the topic of produce safety. and we have 3 in Spanish. We're working on doing some updates between those videos before we make any more, but we also have a project now where we're going to develop videos for the refugee population of growers, both here in Iowa and the state of Kansas. And then the last example that I have of the work that I do is for curriculum. And so when we initially started working on the program that we call home-based food operators, it covers food safety and regulations. We initially did this as a program because the program specialists and regulators and everyone when I got here kept saying we need training and resources about cottage food. And so with the assistance of my first graduate student, we developed the home-based food operator, which was an in-person training. The program has been recently updated to fit the new Iowa laws and cottage foods. And we'll talk about the transition between with us doing it first in person, and then we also transition it to an online program. And so when we developed the program, we wanted to first identify our target audience. And so we did a needs assessment, and we did a pilot offering in spring of 2018. We went to 5 different regions in the state of Iowa. And through that, we were able to get about 100 participants to engage in that pilot program, majority because it was free. And then we then started looking at what to do next with the program, because once we put a price on it, we stopped seeing interest in the program. And so we did a couple of flipped classroom offering, which means when we say flipped classroom, meaning that there's a portion that's online and then a portion that was in person. And so with the flipped classroom version, the participants who wanted to engage with the module 1 as an online version, and then they got to come later to the training than those who wanted it in person. And during that flipped classroom portion, we did all the work that we needed to transition that program to online. As far as the program with the in-person version of it, we had lectures, open discussion, and interactive activities. I actually go in more in details about it on this slide. So we had those lectures, we had the interactive activities. As you can see there, we had a turn to your partner there. But we talked about some ways that their own products could become contaminated with food products. And then we would always end each module with the open discussion where the participants can do question and answer, or get clarification about topics that they wanted to address. But we learned the hard way when we talked about developing the program and transitioning it to online. So we thought, because we had an in-person version and because we had a script to that in-person version, that it'd be easy just to transition online. We learned a lesson that a lot of people learned at the beginning of COVID, especially in teachers, when they transition programs to online, that it's not just that easy to take a lecture that you do in person and transition online. The curriculum specialist that we work with informed us that yes, y'all stay pretty much on script as far as the topic that you're discussing, but then you go off script and you give examples that may not show up if someone just follows the script. So she worked with us, number one, to get our lectures recorded with the caption. And then also she had us to add in real life examples, scenarios that can help improve the lecture, to give that additional information that we usually share in person. And then she worked with us to do interactive lectures, to have some lectures that we will give the participants a prompt, give them some time to think through the topic, and then show them the solution to it and tell them why that was the solution to that topic. And so we had it ready. And with the 2 pilots, we had about 129 participants. And then in January of 2020, let me get it right. January of 2020, I was ready. Way before the pandemic showed up. I was ready to have my program up and accessible on the Moodle platform for Iowa State Extension and Outreach. And then, of course, as everyone knows, we shut down for the pandemic, and our director said, who has program ready to go online? And I had that program that was ready to be viewed online. And so we then, through the pandemic, we saw a few more participants. I think in total, we had about a good 30 that completed the program. But then we also saw a transition in Iowa regulations. So May of 2022, I received a call from the food inspectors at Department of Inspections and Appeals and License, saying that the laws for Iowa cottage food was going to change, as well as home bakers. And so we'll talk a little bit about what we did in changing the curriculum, but I would use this time to give you an overview of the cottage food law and where all of this information came from with the change in the law. And so we started off with the National Food Freedom Law, which has become popular in the United States. And we're starting to see some legislation change in individual states because they wanted to start recognizing the rights of individuals that want to produce, procure, or consume homemade foods free of choice without any unnecessary regulations. And so with the law, they're looking at having all shelf life foods that can be sold directly to consumers, including online. And so that would expand topics such as the home-based food operations in the state of Iowa. And we have seen this law come into place in states such as Maine, North Dakota, Utah, Wyoming, and Iowa. There are still a few states that do have their strict regulations as it relates to cottage food law. And I tell a lot of my colleagues, y'all get ready because y'all are going to be next. And so when that law passed, we started looking at also changing the name of our training, because our training was selected as one of the approved trainings for this area. And so it went from home food operators to home-based kitchen operations. And under that law, or under that category, there are two types of operations. So there's the unlicensed cottage food operators, and then the home food processing establishments, which are regulated by Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals and Licensing. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to break down each of these two categories and give you some insight on where the product can be sold, what type of products can be sold, and labeling restrictions that are labeling requirements that are now required for both operations. And so first, we're going to start with the cottage food operators. And so with them, we have the definition of what DIAL, or we say DAL, has as a definition for cottage food. And that's the production of sale of food from your private residence. So it has to be from your exact home where you reside, where that pillow that you love lives. That is only shelf-stable foods, so no perishable foods can be sold under these laws and regulations. And they are not allowed to be resale to others. And so all of these products are direct to consumers. As far as whether your products is considered shelf stable or not, they're looking at the requirements that your product should meet. And so the scientific definition that they're looking for shelf stable foods, that it has to have a pH below at or below 4.6, and as well as a water activity at or below 0.85. And these are the designations that the FDA uses to determine if products are considered as shelf stable. With the food freedom law, that brought on the ability to now sell home canned and home processed pickles, vegetables under the cottage food operation. They are not subjected to licensing regulations, and your kitchens are not inspected. For the cottage food regulations, and doing those home processed and canned fermented and pickled items, you do have to keep records. And so one thing I have heard the inspectors say is having a standardized recipe that you follow every time. You will have to measure the pH or water activity. So you don't have to do both. You have to do one. The easier of the two is measuring the pH. And you have to keep record of that. You have to keep record of your pH records, as well as if you have a digital pH meter, you have to calibrate it every time you're using it. For some people, if you're making product every day, that means you have to calibrate it every day. So those are some things to look out for, as well as labeling. Labeling is not required for all cottage food products, but I'll talk about it later on. As far as where can you sell your products, with cottage food, it's a direct to consumer market. So, which means that you can sell at your product at the farmer's market and out of your home. You can indulge in some online sales, both in-state and outer state. And some examples of direct acceptable sales places are the roadside stands. You can sell via mail to order, are examples of what you can sell your products. For cottage foods and selling at temporary food establishments, we do say for that you have to get in contact with Department of Inspections and Appeals and Licensing about the temporary food license establishment, for temporary food establishment licensing. And already be aware that with those, they only last for 2 weeks, but you have to get in contact with them about whether you want to have that type of license to sell at other type of sales that don't fall under the places that cottage food operators can sell. So what's always important when we talk about this topic, we get calls all the time of what can I sell? So here is your example of the products that can be sold by these exempt cottage food operators. And so we have whole foods, baked goods, candies, snack foods, honeys, fresh shell eggs, dry mixes, fruit, jams, jellies, and butters and preserves. However, with those, as well as the home canned fruits and vegetables and pickles, you have to make sure that you meet those requirements that we talked about before. So some products that are not allowed under this regulations. I know people ask because they also see this at the farmers market. So no meats, no milk products, butter, cream, meat pies, raw sprouts, cooked rice. Those products are not allowed to be sold under the cottage food law. So it must be a shelf-stable product. So going more into those shelf-stable, going into those home canned and fermented foods. So under that food freedom law, that is now permitted. And so you want to look into what type of these products can you sell. So there's still a restriction even under this topic. So no low acid canning can be done under this regulations. The requirements to meet is you must be testing your batch testing using a pH meter or water activity meter. Each batch must be tested for the values that are listed, and you want to meet those labeling requirements. And because this is a canned food item, you must put your canning date on it. And then you must be able to provide proper documentation. And under that proper documentation file, a listing, that means that standardized recipe needs to be under there as well. Some have also gone through the process of having Iowa State do the pH testing of their products and then keeping that record of that pH testing. But then you want to also make sure that you are following that same standardized recipe when you are making that product every time. So labeling requirements, when we talk about cottage food, in the past, it was optional. Now there is a requirement. And so on that, here's an example of the label that you want to put on your product. So you want to have your common name, the producer's complete name and address, ingredients list in descending order. And I think it's optional, but putting in a net weight of your products. You want to also make sure that you are labeling your products, whether it has allergen or not. And so there has always been 8 allergens. However, also in 2022, sesame seeds have been added, or sesame has been added to the list. So making sure you pay close attention to that as well. And so now that labeling is a requirement for cottage foods, there is a specialized statement that you have to make sure that is on your label, and which is listed there, that says that this product was produced in an unlicensed, unregulated home kitchen. And so the only thing that's not on this label and that's because it's a bread example and not a canned food example, is if you're using it, if you're making jams and jellies or homemade canned food products, you need to put your canning date as well. And that's used as a form of traceability in case there is an outbreak or if there needs to be a recall of that product. You have a way of being able to tell your customers about why they need to return the product. And so going into the home food processors, they were previously known as home bakers, and with the home bakers, they could only sell baked products. However, with the change in the law, that expands what type of products you can make. And there's now also a new word that we're using, which is the home food items. And so according to Iowa code, a homemade food item is a food item that is produced and packaged in a home food processing establishment. For the home food processing establishment, you can sell both temperature control for safety, so perishable food products, as well as non-TCS products. And TCS stands for temperature control for safety, and that is the shelf-stable products. They can be sold both directly and indirectly to consumers as long as you are able to demonstrate your control over those perishable food products. And so that means that you have to understand your food safety principles as it relates to that. So demonstrating control could be that you have a standard operating, a practice of how do you control food safety hazards. And so all of that can include batch records about your products, training documents, receiving records. There's a website for DIAL. They are working on updating the website, and I'll get Lauren the links to the different websites that can provide you with the appropriate records that they're looking for when we say demonstrate control. For the home food processing establishment, they are licensed and they are inspected by Department of Inspection and Appeals and Licensing or your local regulatory authority. There is an annual license fee that you have to pay. There's initial and an annual. As far as the cost of those, you want to refer to DIAL. And there's also a sales limit with that target audience as well. And you want to get that from DIAL as well. We're trying to not give numbers because if they change it, then y'all will go back to this recording and say, well, she said it was this. So we don't say what those numbers are. We just say, please contact DIAL about that. As far as your inspections, they are listed on a criteria of risk levels. And there are 3 risk levels. There are low, moderate, and high risk levels. So to give you an example about low risk, that could be a shelf-stable spice packet, and high risk could be a product that contains meat and requires temperature control for safety. And so your inspections could be virtual or they can be on site. During the pandemic, I guess the skill that both the local inspectors and the FDA has received is that they now can do virtual inspections. But however, there are some inspectors that still come in person. As far as your licensing, you must have documentation that you attended or participated in a food safety training course. There is a list of the approved trainings that DAO has approved that are approved by DAO. The training, the home-based kitchen operators training is one of those. And so those are that's one way to get approved to become a licensed home food processing establishment. Along with that, you want to get your license, you want to pay your fee, and then you'll be able to produce and sell your product and sell directly and indirectly. And so when we talk about that, I think we're going to talk about next in a few slides about where you can sell your products. And so same as the cottage food, here is a list of examples because that's the question that I always get. Well, what can I do? If I do this, what can I do? As I said before, you can do both perishable and non-perishable food products. Under this license, you can do meal kits or even meal prep items. I have added in some slides moved down on down in the presentation that talks about made to order products. You could do products that have meat and poultry in it, such as a lasagna, salad dressings. You can do those perishable glazings and frostings, such as buttercream. And then you also can do some of traditional products, such as bread, cookies, and cakes that are shelf-stable products. But under this law, you can, under this license, you can now sell, although you're making these products in your home, you can now sell them retail and wholesale. That's because you have a license. As far as those locations, direct to consumers, it could be out of your home, it could be online, farmers market, flea market. Indirect, you can do wholesale, restaurants, grocery stores, and resale. There are labeling requirements for this as well. So the traditional things that you see as the same with cottage food. So the common name, the name of your company, your address. For some people, they've asked, do I have to give my address? For this audience, because they have a license, you can put your license number instead. The ingredients list, which is important, as well as those allergens, and paying close attention to what those allergens are. The net weight is also important. For this one, that for the home food processing establishment, there is a special statement for theirs that is different for cottage food, and it says that this product was produced in a home food processing establishment. If it is a perishable item, such as this potato salad, you have to have a use by date. With the shelf life of those perishable food items, you only have a 7-day shelf life unless you have scientific proof that your shelf life is longer than that. So that requires testing, and that testing can get expensive, especially when we talk about the microbial testing that you need to show with that. And also make sure if it is a refrigerated product, having a special instructions of how the consumer should store it. So in May of 2022, Dow gave me the gift that they were looking for a training that they can use as one of the approved trainings for the home food processing establishments. And so the home-based kitchen operators training was ready for to go, except for we had to update the Iowa policies and regulations to meet the new regulations. And then they wanted us to add on a module on record keeping. If you ever interact with this training, we cover record keeping already because we thought that that was a that was a best practice to follow overall, but you get more in depth about some of the records that Dow actually wants you to keep in module 7. So then, although I had got all my questions, my gifts, I had got my ultimate gift of that product, of that training being acceptable, in 2023, there were more updates. And as I mentioned before, those meal kits and made to order foods, there were some updates as far as those. As far as made to order foods, they were now allowable under the home food processing establishments, and they were unlike other homemade food items made by home food processing establishments. As far as the made-to-order food items, they were to be sold to direct-to-consumers only. For the requirements for these made-to-order foods, they must maintain a safe temperature during transportation to the end consumers. The food still needs to be listed on the products list, and they must be maintained up to date and all the time. Refrigeration and hot holding temperatures must also be sufficient to capacity. As far as required documentations, here you see another word that I talked about before, which is those standardized recipes, your labeling, and other important documentations as it relates to your product. That will be a conversation between you and the inspector. And so another note is production and batch records will not be required for made to order only food products. So big thing as far as those go is making sure that you know about the standards when it comes to hot and cold temperatures, which means that you need to have a way to monitor and maintain these temperatures. And with the recommendation, you want to make sure that you're staying out the temperature danger zone. And that is the image that's in the middle. So that danger zone is between that. So the big thing we say here is keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold. And so for hot foods, you want to keep them at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And for cold foods, you want to keep them below 41 degrees Fahrenheit and be able to hold them there. And so as far as there, you want to make sure that you have a way to monitor that. So having the appropriate thermometer. That could be a conversation that you have with the inspectors as far as your inspection is making sure that you have the appropriate thermometer that you need to make sure that you're maintaining these temperatures. And so we have a different training that's coming up. So those of you who want to go into the area of cottage food, of the area of home food processing, or even beyond that to a food processor, you want to scale up from your home, that can be a hard process. And so with the conversations that I've had with my target audience, I've noticed that there's some answers that we need to address as far as product development as well as quality and safety. And so currently we have funding through IDOLS and the Specialty Crop Block program to do successful food product development for new food businesses, managing food quality and safety. This is a program that we're adopting from University of Massachusetts and I think University of Rhode Island, where they have come up with the steps to think of from product ideation to the actual production of the product, which considers quality and safety along the way. This is a 1.5-day short course. We have 2 dates coming up in March. So March, let me make sure I got the date right because I don't want to tell you incorrectly. But if you do scan those QR codes, it'll tell you the dates as well. So Friday, March 8th, and Saturday, March 9th is the Dubuque, Iowa dates. It's at Convivium Community Kitchen. And then the next week, we have the Mickle Center down in Des Moines. And those dates are March 15th and 16th. It's not just the Death by PowerPoint program. There are some lectures. We're going to have some open discussions. And what we did with our specialty crop funding is we developed some interactive activities. So there are some times that you can interact with your other classmates as far as the class go, and we just have a fun time in that 1.5 days. And so I hope you all will be able to join us. And so that is my presentation. I'll take questions. Unless you want me to wait to the end, Lauren. Oh, those were her links that she put in there.
Yes, I was busy typing away as quickly as I could as you were talking about stuff and trying to find links. So, um,
Yes.
we can answer this question for you, Kelly. So yes, we will be sending out a recording of the Zoom, probably in about 2 days, 3 days. Uh, beginning, I should say early next week. I forget today's Thursday. So we'll send that out. It takes me just a little bit to do the captions on it, but yes, we will definitely get that sent out. One of the questions, let me see. We had some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And it looks like those are kind of geared towards John. I'm assuming you don't know
Okay.
much about honey. Do you, Dr. Coleman?
I okay. I at least know the regulations. Regulation part, honey, both pure honey and flavor honey can be sold as I think both cottage food and home food processing. Flavor honey for the longest up until 2022 had to be tested. My colleagues here at Iowa State did a lot of those testing of those honeys. They did not see major impact in the um, water activity or the soluble solids of the honey. And so they took away that you had to have the honeys tested. So you can do both pure honey and flavor honey. I know at least as a cottage food without a license, and you can sell it directly to customers. I'm a little hesitant about what you need to do for retail because there may be other standards for retail, but at least for cottage food, they took away those standards that you had to have the honey tested.
Excellent. And then there were a couple other questions. So it looks like John's not able to join us tonight. And I know those questions about like the farmers market nutrition program are definitely geared exactly to him. I can tell you that for the farmers market nutrition program, they do have a webinar every April and May. So they're hosted online and also in the county extension offices. So here in Muscatine, we typically host them in April. But there's usually a couple dates that you can attend and they go over the requirements for that because there are some really particular things that they have for that program. But it is a really, really awesome program. So the person that asked that question, I will get that sent to them. And then I'll find out the answer about if pumpkins are considered a food product. um,
Okay.
I do have a
Um,
question for you, Dr. Coleman, just for my own kind of snooping around. I'm a home canner.
mhm.
And I know that South Dakota State will, if you send in your recipe, they will process your item and it's $45 to see if it's a safe recipe. Does Iowa State have anything like that that would be available?
So that is a process authority, and currently we don't have a process authority. So you may have to, I do know my colleagues in other states that can do that. But if that, and really for the state of Iowa, if you wanted to sell at the farmer's market, you don't have to do that. You just have to write it down. You have to make sure you're taking that pH, and you can sell directly to consumers. When we talk about wanting to go retail, yeah, you have to do that process authority. You have to get a food processor license. You have to go to better process control school. There's a whole bunch of steps. And so one guy called the other week, everybody, and he said, I'm just gonna start off with selling my barbecue sauce directly to people. And with according to the law that the way it is now, he can do that. He said, and then after I get through testing that out, then I'll work towards scaling up and going to take that training and all of those things. I can tell people now, I have a couple of food science degrees and animal science degree. Better process control school still makes my head spins. There are things that they talk about that in that training that's even over my head, and I've been classically trained as a food scientist. So I would just test out just doing it directly to consumers first. That is where this new cottage food is helpful, and if our cottage food law is helpful, and then we can talk through the process of how to scale up. And then I just wanted to confirm with the person that's asking about testing, the I'm using, hold on, let me go back, and then I'm gonna go forward, and then I'm gonna come back here. Here is the link, because the Dow website to a lot of these topics is down. Website, all the links haven't been put in, but they still have a lot of the original links that were on the Dow website on the Iowa Food Protection Task Force. And so under these different tabs, I guess I can share my screen. That would be helpful. I'm just talking to y'all and looking at it, because I talk to the people on the phone like this. But on this website, and the link that I just put in the chat, is it gives you those same definitions that I just gave you. And then they have links to the laws and regulations. So if you want to read those, you can. And then under the home food processing establishment, they have the rules again, how to get your license, and let's see if this required training link, let's see if that works. Let's see. We going on a field trip together. Okay, here it is. We found it. So here you go. I'll put that in there for you, Lauren. And the one document that I was looking at to answer the question about the honey is located right here. Is my food a cottage food or a home food processing establishment license needed? They made an extensive list. They stole this idea from us about what products are allowed. And so I'm gonna do a quick search for honey, and then it takes me down there, and what it's asking whether it's a cottage food and whether it's a home food processing. It should it need a license? Now, this, I hate this part. This is confusing. For pure honey, it says no, no. Then you get over here, it says unregulated, unregulated. And basically what it's saying is that there's no license required to sell pure honey. For your flavored, it said it is a cottage food and it's a home food processing establishment, so you can sell under both. For both, yes, they're saying that you can do it. I think what differentiates between the two is that cottage, you can only sell directly to consumers. With your home food processing establishment, you can go retail with it. As from what I've heard so far from Dow, you do not have to do any product testing of those honeys. And then eggs, they're going to be in the shell, so you can't test them. And it'll be hard to test them because the big test that you want to do for the eggs is for salmonella, and they are inherently in the eggs. But the regulations as far as for farmers marketing eggs is if you sell them, you have to make sure that you're keeping them at that cold refrigeration, which is 41 and below. And any other questions?
Excellent. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out too.
Yep.
All right.
Well, thank you all for spending Thursday evening with me. And yes, I'm still at work. It was
That's the life of extension. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
But I'm always willing to answer questions, so you can call me. You can email me. I am a little slow right now because we're in the middle of grant season and it's the big grant. And so I'm a little delayed with responding to people, but I'll get back to you. But and we can answer the questions that you have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Coleman. We appreciate your time. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me as well. Otherwise, we will see you if you choose to continue with us in our small farm series. We will see you next week where we can talk about eggs there too, because we're going to be talking about small scale poultry production. So that's pretty timely for this kind of question, actually. So, all right. I hope everybody has a great night.